danger.
Hello friends and welcome to Innsmouth. Thanks for joining today's tour, which is our 53rd. I'm one of your guides, Rob Poynton.
And I'm the other one, Tim Mendes.
And as you can see, you joined us today in beautiful Innsmouth Town Square, bathed in sunlight. Though I have noticed the Halloween decorations are starting to go up.
Yeah, there's some interesting pumpkins already, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's a non-Euclidean carving going on.
And I'm not sure if that sort of scarecrow-y thing over there, I don't want to go and have a closer look.
We'll
just leave that.
Yeah. I thought it was supposed to be the terrible old man for a while, and I just thought I'd stay away from it.
Oh, he is a terrible old man.
Oh, he is a terrible man.
Terrible old man.
Yeah, I just want to, before we go any further, I just want to reassure our listeners. You can hear I'm quite croaky today. I just want to reassure people that I'm fine. It's just a cold. I haven't got any gills, no scales. I'm not doing the transition. I'm all good.
I can confirm that, folks. I just had a check, and there's no sign of gills. So
I think we're good.
So we're going to be going into Tim's shop in a moment to discuss today's story, but we've got a couple of news items before that. First thing we wanted to mention is that we managed to get out of Innsmouth for a short while a couple of weeks back.
Yeah.
And we had a good chat with our friends on the Cast of Cthulhu podcast. Jim and James have been over to Innsmouth, I think, once or twice before.
There's a couple of times, I think, now, yeah.
Yeah, to talk about The Thing, wasn't it?
Yes.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
And Lovecraftian film, because their podcast is all about Lovecraftian film adaptations. So we had a chat about the literary side, didn't we, of horror?
We did, yeah. It was a good chat, yeah. It's nice to try and introduce them to some, sort of hardcore Cthulhu mythos literature.
Yeah, the hardcore stuff.
Yeah, some obscurities there. No, it was good.
And it's a great podcast. Their latest edition, or the one just before us, they were discussing the film The Ritual, which we covered a little while back.
Yep.
So, of course, we'll put the link up to them in the show notes below. Do go and give it a listen. They're great guys, and it's a very enjoyable podcast. And also, just prior to that, I was on the Appendix N podcast talking about Robert E. Howard's only Conan novel, Hour of the Dragon.
Nice.
That was with Jeff and Hoy. And Jeff, of course, has visited us here in Innsmouth. And he also guested on the Strange Shadows podcast recently.
Yes.
I think it was the end of the story, wasn't it?
It was the end of the story, yeah, because we ended up spending a lot of time talking about monks getting up to monk porn, wasn't it?
That was it. So I'm not sure if that episode is for patrons only, but in any event, we'll put a link out to Appendix N. They basically cover all the literature that was an influence on Dungeons and Dragons and tie a lot of it into role-playing and other stuff. Excellent podcast again, so please do take a listen to that. And there's one more item, I believe, Tim, your radio show.
Yeah, it's now been going for a few weeks. I've got a weekly radio show on the Feel Good Station. That's feelgoodstation.uk. It's every Saturday night. It's called The Cellar of Horrors, and I focus on my two loves, which is obviously horror literature. I tend to have a lot of guests on, and also goth music. So we get a lot of tunes. I'll have two interviews per show, one from a band and one from a horror writer or something like that. We had a guest the other week, somebody who you might recognise, didn't we, sir?
Yes, I was at my 10 minutes of fame, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice to have a chat about the music side of things as well.
Yeah. That's also on Mixcloud as well. Just look for me on there, Tim Mendes, and you'll find previous episodes. So, yeah.
Okay, shall we get out of this baking Innsmouth sun and inside?
Yeah, the smell's rancid, isn't it? You know, there's nothing worse than like dead fish under heat.
I think it's the drains again. I'm not sure if this is part of the Halloween season ambience, perhaps, I think. Yeah.
Oh, possibly, yeah.
So the story we're discussing today is Robert E. Howard's Worms of the Earth, one of his Bran MacMorn stories. And we're going to be getting into a lot of history in this one and talk about the Picts, both historical and Robert E. Howard's version. And I think seems to be quite a lot of agreement on this, that this is one of Howard's best stories.
Yeah, definitely. Pretty much everything I've seen cites this as one of his best. I mean, it was one of Lovecraft's favourites as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. And for me, it's certainly my favourite non-Conan story. It's yeah.
Yeah.
So Robert E. Howard, I'm sure you're all familiar with anyway, but of course he was a Texan writer, a member of the Lovecraft Circle, correspondent with Lovecraft. They swapped a huge amount of letters and had very wide-ranging and in-depth discussions, particularly on this subject, which was kind of Howard's pet theme, I guess, of civilization versus barbarism. That's a running theme throughout a lot of his work.
Yeah.
Most well known for his invention, the character Conan the Barbarian, of course, which has since gone through various iterations and versions. But we won't go into that now. But Conan was just one of many characters that he invented. Solomon Kane and Bram McMahon, who we're talking about today, King Cole, of course, Steve Costigan. He wrote a lot of Western stories. So really a kind of all-round, very proficient action writer.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that was always the biggest difference between him and Lovecraft, wasn't it? There was a lot more emphasis on the action as opposed to the atmosphere.
Yes. Yeah. And there's quite a lot. Well, I'm not even sure that it's speculation, really, that the Shadow over Innsmouth was a result of Howard's influence on Lovecraft in terms of putting some more action into the stories. Because that's certainly the most action-packed of Lovecraft stories.
Definitely. Yeah. You actually see that more as Lovecraft's evolved as a writer. You could see he was taking more of that sort of Howardian approach, putting a bit more action in there. All his protagonists weren't quite as didn't faint quite off as often. Yeah.
Well, if you want action, just come to Innsmouth. You get all the action you want here.
Yeah.
Too much action.
Ooh.
In a way, I always think of Howard as a historical writer. That's pretty much what he wanted to be. He did write some historical fiction as well.
Yeah.
But even his fantasy or sword and sorcery work always reads to me like historical fiction, just with a bit of added magic or something.
Yeah.
In terms of the detail and the depth and the way he conjures up, it's very visual. Very vivid and very visual.
Yeah, he was a very visual writer, I feel. And I think that's why a lot of his work has been adapted into comic book and things like that, because it lends itself to that visual medium better than, say, a Smith or a Lovecraft.
Yeah. Well, as we mentioned before, that idea of how do you film personal terror?
Yeah.
Internal monologue and
kind of existential dread. How do you film existential dread? Yeah.
Whereas someone taking on 10 of the King's Guard in an epic sword fight up a staircase, it's made for film.
Yeah, I think in the Circle, I bet there was definitely definitely Howard and Tierney were the more, because he was very historical as well. I mean, a lot of his stuff was set in ancient Rome.
Yes,
and you can see parallels between the two, because they were sort of like historical fiction with the weird thrown in.
Yes. If you want to read more about Howard's life and his works, then I highly recommend the biography by Mark Finn called Blood and Thunder, which is pretty much the definitive work, I think. There have been earlier works. I think, did Linkharter or else Sprague de Camp?
Linkharter did one.
Was it Linkharter? Yeah. But, well, let's just say there's some
factual inaccuracies.
Yeah, let's leave it at that. We don't go into
You say that pretty much about any biography done by Linkharter.
Well,
there was
true.
He never let's put it the nicest way possibly. He didn't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah. But the Mark Finn book is really good. If you're into Howard, then that's essential reading. So, this story, Worms of the Earth, was published in November 1932 in Weird Tales. Clark Ashton Smith wrote to Derleth. He called it a real first-rater, and HPL termed it a macabre masterpiece. There's also one of my favourite comic adaptations of this story as well. 1976, really? Marvel. It's a Roy Thomas adaptation, and the art was by Tim Conrad and Barry Windsor Smith.
Oh, nice.
It's immaculate. It's a really beautiful adaptation. I don't know if that where it would be available. I know there's been reissues of various Savage Sword Conans and that kind of thing over the years.
Yeah.
But I'll put a link up to some of the artwork. It really is spectacular. So this is, it's a sword and sorcery tale, isn't it? We've got to call it that.
Yeah.
But it is in a historical setting. It's not in one of Howard's made-up sort of worlds or universes. We're in Dark Ages Britain.
I mean, that's why it reminds me, especially with the Roman aspect, that's why it does really remind me of Tierney as well. And I guess they were doing it around the same sort of time. So, yeah. Wonder if they ever swapped notes.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if there was. Did they have contact or?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's something.
So we're both in contact with Lovecraft, but I don't know if.
If anyone knows out there of any direct connection between the two, that would be interesting to find out. Did they influence each other? They must have been aware and read each other.
Yeah,
they're both in weird tales. And what a great opening line. Strike in the nails, soldiers, and let our guests see the reality of our good Roman justice. So we're in it straight away, aren't we?
Yeah, you know exactly what's going on there, don't you?
You can hear the thud of the hammer into the nails.
Yeah,
through the flesh and into the wood.
Yeah, that's one of the things that first strikes you in this is because with Lovecraft and a lot of the others, you don't get that kind of real visceral descriptions, but you get a really sort of nasty description of the spike going into his arm and through it and into the wood, don't you?
Yeah, and the splintering bone and
that's the one.
The rest of it. Yeah. So we'll get on to crucifixion in a moment because there's some interesting things. It's not often you get to say that, is it?
No, it's not, is it? First thing it reminded me of is years ago I lived across the road from St. Peter's Church in Brighton, and they did a reenactment of the crucifixion on Easter Sunday. And I got drunk the night before and I was hungover and I could hear this doof, and I was elbowed Mrs. Go look out the window. It sounds like somebody's being crucified. And she looked out the window and went, "Yep, that's exactly what's happening."
That could mess with your mind.
No, it was weird. Yeah, wholesome family entertainment.
Yeah, and they really go for it, don't they? On some of those things.
Oh, mate.
So,
yeah.
So we have a group of people witnessing this crucifixion. The speaker wrapped his purple cloak around his powerful frame and settled back into his chair. And this is Titus Sulla, the military governor of Eboracum, which was the Roman title for York, and at the time was the biggest Roman settlement in the north of England, I think. The name is said to come from the Brittonic Eboracum, which means yew tree place, though that is disputed by some historians. And it was founded in 71 AD by the general Cerealis, who led the 9th Legion across the Humber. He was later appointed governor of Britain. And York, or Eboracum, it started as a fort, but very quickly, because of its position on the rivers, became a huge trading post. So it grew very quickly into a major settlement. In fact, it was the capital of northern Britain. Now, I'm going to spark a north-south divide here, which we kind of represent.
We do,
me being a Londoner.
Me being a northern monkey, yeah.
So, the capital of northern Britain was known by the Romans as Britannia Inferior. And the south was Britannia Superior. So, I'm not saying anything. Just pointing out a fact.
We're going to go on Monty Python now. Bloody Romans.
Come over here naming our country, putting us down.
Yeah. What do they know? What do Romans ever do for us?
So we have this crucifixion going on outside the walls of York, in effect. And there's a little mention of Circus Maximus there, which was, of course, was the major arena in Rome for chariot racing and gladiatorial combat and all the rest of it. I think with Howard being a historical writer, and he certainly read up a lot on his history. Now, that's history from, I guess you look in the Edwardian age, really, and Victorian age. So there are some inaccuracies that he was working from.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, a lot of this fits in together. It feels like he's done his research.
Yeah.
But of course, Titus Sulla is not the only person there, is he?
No, there's another chap in the crowd, isn't there? A mysterious fellow. What name's he going by on this?
Partha Mac Ochna.
That's it. I wanted you to say that. Yeah, I'm going to struggle with pronunciations on this one.
But of course, this is Bran McMorn, who's on a kind of undercover mission, isn't he? He's sort of spying on the Romans.
Yeah.
But we'll go a little bit more into who Bran McMorn is in a little while. But I get the sense throughout this that Titus and the Romans have an idea that he's not who he says he is.
Yeah, there is a bit of suspicion there, isn't there? Because obviously, he's a bit het up, and he's not afraid. I think it's more the fact that he's not afraid to get in their face a little bit, because most people would think twice about getting, especially because he's flanked by these huge Teutonic legionnaires, isn't he?
Yeah.
These Germanic chaps.
Yeah. Blonde giants from the Rhineland, which was, of course, a thing because the Romans did recruit, Germanic tribes and all sorts. Yeah, and in fact, everyone's heard of the Praetorian Guard, the Emperor's Guard, but there was also another unit called the Germanic Horse Guard, who are a sort of Imperial Guard unit as well. There was up to 500 of them at one time. So again, you feel like Howard's done his research here.
Yeah.
And we have Bran McMorn is basically watching one of his own men being crucified, right?
Yeah.
And Bran McMorn has one of his other guys with him who's described as a sort of misshapen giant.
Yeah.
Who is sort of, he's almost got his arms wrapped round Bran's legs, isn't he? It's like he's clinging onto him because you get the feeling the Romans are trying to provoke him into some sort of action here.
Yeah, you get that. I got that impression, like the lead Roman chappie. He's saying things definitely to needle him, especially at the end after they've sort of, what happens. He comes out with this quip like, "Do you want to join me for some dinner?" It's just like, oh.
And I like this thing the governor says, "Oh, Partha Macothna, when you return to your tribe, you will have a tale to tell of the justice of Rome, who rules the south." And Bran just replies, "I will have a towel." It's a grim story, isn't it, this one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Sulla tries to justify this as Pax Romana, which you get rewarded for virtue and loyalty to Rome, but extreme punishment for any infringement. And you see, emissary of Pictland, how swiftly Rome punishes the transgressor. I see, answered the Pict in a voice which strongly curbed anger made deep with menace, that the subject of a foreign king is dealt with as though he were a Roman slave.
Yeah, because it turns out that he's done for killing a Roman in a fight, wasn't it? It's a merchant who tricked, cheated, and robbed him.
Yeah. And then hit him as well, laid hands on him.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
This is where you get that idea again of his Sulla sort of goading him because, well, his own king hasn't done anything to save him, and Bran here is really trying to hold himself in because the guy on the cross is looking at him. He obviously knows, this is Bran, this is my king, he's going to save me in a minute, but there's no saving.
Yes, there's several lines throughout of it where you get the guy on the cross is sort of looking at him, almost pleading with his eyes, and he can see Bran can see the hope that's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get this sense of frustration because he knows this guy's expecting me to save him, but I can't do anything, And
so we get this very vivid description of how the crucifixion takes place and the cross is pulled up into standing position. Yet the sufferer made no outcry, though his blackened lips writhed back until the gums were visible and his shaggy head jerked involuntarily from side to side. Very stoic.
That's us northern chaps,
You got to get one back now, you see.
Yeah, this is it.
Now, crucifixion everyone knows about, of course, but it was also applied to people being impaled, people hung or nailed to trees, as well as the pole and the cross. And really, its function was as a punishment, but more as a warning and a humiliation.
Yes.
Because people typically were crucified naked. In some cases, their legs were broken. So you're left to die there for a few days. This wasn't a quick, chop your head off execution. This was a public spectacle.
Yeah, it was like the old gibbet as well and all that kind of thing. It was more of a deterrent and making an example of than anything else. Because, even after they died, they'd leave them up there until the bones were picked clean, wouldn't they?
Yes, yeah.
The
greatest event or in terms of scale we know about, is, of course, the Spartacus rebellion.
Yeah.
Following which Crassus crucified 6,000 followers of Spartacus. Was it the Via Appia that leads into Rome? Were they along the road?
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure of that, but 6,000, that's quite a thing, isn't it?
That's terrifying numbers, really, isn't it? Blimey.
And it was abolished in 337, so not long after this takes place. Because here, I think we're in about 3rd century. I think it's about 200 AD.
Yeah, not entirely sure, but yeah, it sounds about right from what'd be going on.
But now, this is one of the interesting facts I discovered, because there's only been evidence of one crucifixion found in Britain, and that was in a village called Fenstanton, which is literally 5 miles up the road from me, from where I live.
Really? I think I've been to Fenstanton at some point.
Yeah, well, M.R. James, there's the Fenstanton Witch, is one of his stories.
Yes.
And it's actually not that far from the Caxton Gibbet and that area, speaking of gibbets earlier.
Yeah.
And, 2017, they found there was 5 small Roman cemeteries were discovered, containing about 40 adults and 5 kids, dating back, well, they estimate 4th century or earlier, and one skeleton, known as Skeleton 4926, was of a man aged between 25 and 35, about 5'7" tall, and there were 12 iron nails found with him, one through the ankle. So this is the only known evidence of crucifixion. We also had damaged legs as well.
Right.
Which leads back to that. Now, there's one major sort of fault I draw with this story, which is around the geography of it, because we get mention of fens a lot.
Yes.
Fenstanton, as the name implies, is on the edge of the Cambridgeshire Fens, right?
Yeah.
And so, in my mind, this is that guy.
Yeah.
It's just that Howard got the locations slightly wrong, but
no, I like it. Yeah, we'll go with that.
And yeah, we get this thing. He'll live for days, said Sulla cheerfully. These pigs are harder than cats to kill, which is a slightly disturbing quote. And I'll keep a guard of 10 soldiers watching day and night to see that no one takes him down before he dies. Because Sulla says to Valerius, one of the guards, in honour of our esteemed neighbour King Bran MacMorn, give him a cup of wine. And this is where the Pict on the cross makes about the only move he's got left open to him, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. Hocks one up and gobs in his face, pretty much.
Yeah. Valerius is so annoyed by this, he dashed the cup to the ground, and before anyone could halt him, wrenched out his sword and sheathed it in the man's body, so that the Pict got his quick, clean death.
Yeah.
And I like Bran MacMorn's or Partha MacOthna's reaction here, because he started violently, but he bit his lip and said nothing. You can almost sense this simmering rage, can't you, building?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. I like this token. I like the token punishment that Sulla gives to this chap that's just stabbed him. Not because he stabbed him or anything like that, but because he gave him an easy death. Give up your sword, young sir. Place him under arrest. A few days in a cell with stale bread and water will teach you to curb your patrician pride. It's like, okay, slap on the wrist time.
Yeah, and it's quite an interesting thing, because pride is what the Romans are all about, right? And
gotcha. Yeah.
There's several references to this, to Sulla being the typical prideful, arrogant Roman conqueror, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Bran and who he is, and we'll get onto the Picts a little bit later. But I think an interesting thing here is the description of Bran. Normally with Howard, we see these sort of tall, I won't necessarily say clean cut, because Conan's not exactly clean cut, but they're of a type, aren't they? They're quite heroic in stature, I suppose.
Chiseled.
Yeah.
They all look like 1980s WWF wrestlers. They've all got the flowing blonde locks and the chiseled pecs and all the rest,
That's it. Glistening a bit in the...
they're nicely oiled.
Yeah. But the description we get of Bran has some elements of that, but there are also some different elements as well. So the first thing we get told about him is he was dark, which is interesting. I'll come back to that in a bit. But not in a Latin Mediterranean way.
Yes.
His dark complexion is not the rich olive of the south. Rather, it's the bleak darkness of the north, The whole aspect of the man vaguely suggested the shadowed mists, the gloom, the cold and icy winds of the naked northern lands. And his height was only medium, but there's something about him that transcended mere physical bulk. And here we get the very Conan-esque thing, quite common to most of Howard's heroes. The wolf and the panther, the idea of the liveness, the wild animal.
A certain element, yes.
Now, I'll talk about this dark skin issue because to me this was very interesting in the light of the discovery of Cheddar Man.
Yeah.
A few years back.
Definitely.
Who was a skeleton that was discovered near Cheddar Gorge, a Mesolithic skeleton. And I think I'm right in saying it's pretty much the oldest complete skeleton that's been found in the UK. And I did DNA tests and everything else on it. And I'll put a link up in case you haven't seen it, but they did a reconstruction of this chap. And he's got very dark skin, brown skin, black hair, green or blue eyes, which upset a certain
element.
A certain element, yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
But to my mind, when I saw that, I just thought Bran McMorn.
Yeah, definitely.
It just looks the part. So it's very interesting to see, way before any of this came to light, Howard had chosen that look, if you like.
Well, he had a similar thing with the. Went to see it as kids. They had it in the Manchester Museum. It was that guy they'd found in a tar pit.
Oh yeah.
And it was, I can't remember what he was called now. It was sort of the Bog Man or something they called him.
Was it Pete Bog? Did they name him?
Yeah.
Or something?
Yeah. But again, because he had dark complexion and things like that, and obviously you had people go, no, it's just the effects of it being in the tar pit that's done that. It's like, no, I think you're fine.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And another thing they found with this guy, because they did some local tests and all that, they found a sort of descendant of him living about half a mile away, who the chap turned out to be a history teacher, funnily enough.
Nice.
And when you see his photo next to the reconstruction, you've got to say, yeah, I can see the similarity.
That's brilliant.
So it's amazing because, I mean, Mesolithic era, we're talking about 10,000 years ago.
God, yeah.
So the fact that he still has descendants, which is quite natural, I suppose, if people don't move, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that guy's the last of the Picts, perhaps.
Yeah, if his history teaching work ever dries up, that's his new job, isn't it?
Bran McMorn Tribute Act.
Yeah.
So then we cut to a scene later on where Parther or Bran is
he's not happy, is he?
Kind of venting his wrath, isn't it? No, he's not happy. He's pacing up and down the chambers they're giving. And we find the name of his old servant is Grom.
Yeah, poor old Grom. He don't half cop it, does he?
He does. And he kind of said, yeah, I know why you held my knees so tightly. Why you muttered aid of the moon woman. You feared I would lose my self-control and make a mad attempt to succour the poor wretch.
Yeah.
And we get that. I believe that was what the Roman dog wished to do.
Yes.
So he knows he was being goaded.
I love at this point as well, when he's in middle flow, this is where you get the first hints of the Cthulhu mythos creeping in.
Yes.
His part of his rant is black gods of Relay. Even you would I invoke to the ruin and destruction of those butchers. I swear by the nameless ones. Men should die howling for that deed. Now, interestingly, while I was reading up on this, the original draft actually said Cthulhu instead of nameless ones.
Ah, right. Nice.
But he changed it for Weird Tales. He changed it.
Right. Yeah. Is there any indication why he changed that? Do we know, or was that?
No, it was just changed between the draft and the published version. We don't know whether it was he did it or Farnsworth Wright did it. You know,
right? Well, it sounds like it could have been a right move, doesn't it? But either way, it's a very clear reference. And I think this is a debate that runs sometimes. Actually, we'll just mention this here because we're into the mythos stuff.
Indeed,
we get Dagon mentioned a lot as well throughout.
Oh yeah.
This is one of the stories that firmly ties the Howardian and Lovecraftian universes together.
Yes.
Now, there was a big debate on this just recently on one of the Facebook groups, and someone was pointing out, yes, you can say it's an influence, but it's not the same universe because they weren't building universes, and it's not like the Marvel universe, and it's... Well, we know that. we know that there wasn't this big construction going on, as we've spoken about before. It developed very organically.
Yeah.
But this is a direct link between the two. You can't say that this isn't part of the Lovecraftian mythos, because it is.
Well, interestingly, in the introduction to the version I've got of this, it actually says that earlier on, when he was writing, I think it was maybe the Blackstone or one of the other stories, he just read a bunch of Lovecraft stuff, and he actually sent a letter to Lovecraft about saying, "Could you tell me more about Cthulhu and Relay and Abdullah Hazred and the Necronomicon? Because I want to stick some of it in mine."
Right.
So he actually said, sort of, it is.
It's a conscious decision.
It is a conscious decision.
Yeah, it's not just throwing in, like you might throw in the name Beelzebub or something, or whatever, just for a bit of effect. But this is a very specific reference to Lovecraft's Yog-Sothory.
Yes, indeed.
And by that reasoning, we have an earlier Bran Mak Morn story that features King Cole, who's plucked from the past and brought into Bran Mak Morn's time to fight a huge battle against the Romans. So that means that Bran Mak Morn shares the same universe as Cole. Cole was an Atlantean, and the Sumerians are, of course, descendants of the Atlanteans.
Yep.
So the whole thing ties in very neatly. And I know this is all pseudo history and it's fun and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. It feels satisfying for me to tie these things all in together.
Yeah, well, that's what I've always said about the Cthulhu mythos. One of the things that got me so hooked on it when I first discovered it was finding all these little links and saying, "Oh, well, that links back to that, and that links up to that, and that's what I do in my work. Is I'll put these little links in all my stories, even if they're not directly related. They're all related from some way, shape, or form, because I love that. I love being able to put a pin in one story and tying it to several others just through little bits and pieces of ephemera, almost. I like that, and it's why I like why series endure, isn't it? When you've got these links running through everything that people can hook on to.
I think it's nice, and I try to do it as well, especially with my Innsmouth stories, to link in a particular person and a book. And it's it's like little Easter eggs, like finding little Easter eggs in things.
Yeah. Well, recently when we spoke to David Hambling, I mean, he does it a lot.
Absolutely.
His stuff is all linked in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
And just in case you think this is all one way, Lovecraft in, was it Shadow Out of Time, I believe, or might be Whisper in Darkness. I'd have to check that.
It's Whisperer, if you meet Bran Mak Morn.
Yeah, we get the mention of the Sumerian chieftain Crom Yar.
It's Whisperer.
Yeah, Whisperer. Yeah. So this was not. I saw someone suggested really recently that Howard was ripping off other writers by doing this. This was a game they played. No one's ripping anyone off.
Well, it's like the nicknames and everything, isn't it? It was all a game with these guys. They were a bunch of mates arsing about, basically. So actually, we haven't mentioned, have we? Because I love Howard's nickname from Lovecraft, Two Gun Bob, because he was a Texan.
Perfect. Yes. So now we find out that this is indeed Bran Mak Morn, and that he's on this spying mission. And this is where we start to get these elements of civilization versus barbarism. They have thought to play with me, these Romans, masking their contempt and scorn only under polished satire. Rome is courteous to barbarian ambassadors. They give us fine houses to live in, offer us slaves, pander to our lusts with women and gold and wine and games, but all the while they laugh at us. Their very courtesy is an insult. And this is very much a recurring theme in a lot of Howard stories about the gilded lie of the civilized world.
Well, it's like the whole class war thing, isn't it? I mean, I think it resonates quite well with Britain because you've got that sort of, you do get that kind of sentiment that, their very courtesy is an insult, sort of.
Yeah, and it's the contempt is never far from the surface, even in some modern day politicians who we better not get into that at the moment, who tell us we're all too lazy and if you're poor it's your own fault. But and there's that lovely quote from Howard that it was something like, as a rule, barbarians are more courteous than civilized men because civilized men know they won't get their skulls split open if they insult someone, which is very Howardian sort of attitude. Uh,
Well, the other thing about the Scots, isn't it? They're always polite.
yeah, because, And here we get one of those lovely Howardian lines, the grim lines. My people look to me. If I fail them, if I fail even one, even the lowest of my people, who will aid them? To whom shall they turn? By the gods, I'll answer the jibes of these Roman dogs with black shaft and trenchant steel. And you're thinking, yeah, go Bran, yeah.
Fired up now, isn't he? Hang on, he is an 80s WWF wrestler.
And we get this Bran decides, right, well, Sulla's got to go. He's inflicted this terrible event on one of my subjects. I was unable to help, so he's got to die. And old Valerius, who killed him, has got to die as well. But how do we do it? Because he's got his German guards around him all the time. As soon as you got near him, you're going to be cut down. And good old Grom, he volunteers for the suicide mission, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Let me, master. My life is worth nothing. I will cut him down.
Yeah, nay, old war dog. I love it. It's proper sword and sorcery stuff at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, the language is great.
Yeah,
but it's nice. He's got this genuine concern for his subjects.
Oh yeah,
he could just, like the Roman would say to the guy, "Yeah, off you go. Then you go and kill him, and
yeah,
well done. Sacrifice yourself for Rome. We'll give you a little medal."
Yeah, you get this sort of sense of honor, don't you? Well, that's the whole point. Is the fact that he feels he's let this guy down because he was powerless to do anything, even though he just got slaughtered if he'd have tried to do anything.
Yeah.
But you get that real feeling of sort of, but it's all honor, isn't it? It's all like, I've let my people down, I must get revenge. It's all very noble.
Because even as we find out later on, he doesn't want to just kill this guy. He doesn't just want to run up and stab him or poison him. He wants to face him in man-to-man combat, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's going to give the guy a chance to fight for his life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where we start to get this plot developing now, because Bran he's kept his ear open. Obviously, he's here on a spying mission, and he's found out that there's trouble up on the wall, which is obviously Hadrian's wall.
As you'd imagine, a bunch of angry Scots.
Well, it's talking about the Britons here as well, because there's trouble with the Britons.
Yeah.
So the troops are going to be marching up to the wall, but Sulla isn't going. He's sending Caius Camillus in his place. And Caius Camillus is stationed in the Tower of Trajan. Now, this is a little bit of an odd one, because Trajan was an emperor, Roman emperor, 98 to 117. He was a soldier emperor, and he oversaw one of the biggest military expansions of the empire.
Mm-hmm.
He was also responsible for a huge wave of public building. And of course, in Rome, we have Trajan's column that was built in 113, which is like a triumphal column to him. But he never visited Britain. So I guess in Howard's way, it's like they also built a tower in Britain to honour the emperor on the far outpost of the empire kind of thing. I guess that sort of makes sense, doesn't it?
I can believe that. I mean, you see that sort of triumphalist stuff. I mean, you've got, right, that if the Nazis had won, there'd have been columns all over bloody everywhere.
Yes.
It's that kind of military triumphalist thing.
And it's almost like it's on the edge of the empire as a sort of statement that this is the border for now, but we're going to be extending even further beyond this.
Yeah. I believe, I can fully believe it,
So that basically becomes the plan, is going to follow Sulla out to the Welsh borders and take care of him there. But it's how he's going to take care of him becomes the darkness of the plot. And certainly the Lovecraftian element reoccurs as well.
Oh, yes.
I like this, even though his emotions are in turmoil, Bran is like the true barbarian. He lays down and is asleep instantly.
I love that.
But he falls into this strange dream where he meets Gonar, the priest of the moon. But Gonar is like the chief Pictish shaman, but this is the same name as Gonar from Cole's day. And in fact, in that earlier story where Cole comes forward, it's Gonar the shaman in both ages who sort of affect that sort of that journey. So we have this very strong link there back to the Picts of Cole's day. And Bran says, well, this is what's happening. I'm going to take my revenge, and this is how I'm going to do it. Yeah, because Gonar knows that Bran is going to start what would be the word? He's going to start making deals with very dark forces in order to exact his revenge. And Gonar sort of begging him not to. Take your vengeance in another way. Return to the heather, mass your warriors, join with Cormac and his girls, and spread a sea of blood and flame the length of the Great Wall. And Bran says, yeah, I'm going to do all that as well. But first I will have a vengeance such as no Roman ever dreamed of.
Yeah.
And then we get this nice thing about it's almost referring back to the long history or prehistory of Britain. Because what do the Romans know of the mysteries of this ancient isle, which sheltered strange life long before Rome rose from the marshes of the Tiber? So what we find out is that the Picts came to Britain from other places, which again we'll mention in a bit, and they drove out the existing natives who kind of retreated underground.
Well, this is where the Machen-esque creeps in.
Yeah.
It's the other big influence on this is the works of Arthur Machen, because I don't know if a lot of people are aware, but Robert E. Howard cites Novel of the Black Seal as one of his top 3 favourite stories.
Right.
And that's all about the little people that live in the hills. And Howard even did a story, The Little People,
yes,
which was his direct tribute to Arthur Machen. So, and obviously, as we know from when we've done Machen in the past, that he was an influence on Lovecraft as well. Like Dunwich Horror, obviously, was a, that was a take on Great God Pan.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of it all running through. It's interesting how it all sort of dovetails.
It threads together, and as you said before, with no conscious effort on their part. They didn't sit down and thrash out, well, you do this and I'll do that. This was an organic process.
Yeah.
And it's nice because it ties in, but it doesn't always dovetail exactly.
Yeah.
But then that's what gives it that air of fact and belief.
Exactly.
But was this? No, it was that. Oh, but it could have been this,
Well, that was something that Lovecraft especially did consciously, wasn't it? He did put inconsistencies in his mythos, because that's real theology is like that.
Yeah.
Which is really shrewd.
You just think of the world's major religions and how many different versions of each one there is in that sense. They'll all come from the same book. But
Yeah. Well, it's like you go to a town on the Bible Belt or something, and you can get like several denominations on the same street.
Yeah. And here we get the first mention of these beings, and again, this is lovely Howardian speech. I fight Rome with her armoured legions, her broad fertile plains and rich seas, her mountains and her rivers and her gleaming cities, her wealth, her steel, her gold, her mastery and her wrath. By steel and fire I will fight her, and by subtlety and treachery, by the thorn in the foot, the adder in the path, the venom in the cup, the dagger in the dark. Aye, his voice sank somberly, and by the worms of the earth.
You really should be shaking your fist while you said that. Yeah.
I feel I should be doing this in some sort of maybe Scottish. No, I wouldn't inflict that on anyone, but you can hear it.
It's a bit William Wallace, isn't it?
Oh no! Freedom.
Yeah, that's the one.
Dear, oh dear.
Yes.
That's yes.
Yes. Well, we'll gloss over that.
Let's gloss over that. And Gonar is so against this. He's saying, well, if you do this, you're going to go down to hell and you're not going to come back. And what's going to happen to your people then? But it seems that Bran has been researching this a bit. He's been making his library rolls.
Yeah.
Because he thinks or he knows that even though the worms of the earth are now hidden from sight, there is a door to them. There is some way of getting to them. And if there is this door, he's going to find it. Somewhere among the bleak fens of the west, I will find it. Then we get this nice response from Gonar. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Thrice woe. Woe to Pictum. Woe to the unborn kingdom. Woe to the sons of men. Because this is going to be some sort of devil's deal, isn't it?
Yeah. Whoa, 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 you boat. I don't know. Yeah, there's so many woes in that sentence.
There is.
Hang on, I'm going to count them. 10. 10 woes in a sentence. That's brilliant.
10 woes. Wow. That sounds like a name of a Clark Ashton Smith story, doesn't it? The 10 woes of Gonar.
Oh, that would be a Clark Ashton Smith. Yeah, 10 woes of Gonar.
There's another one waiting to be written.
Yeah.
Now, at this point, I just want to mention my only issue with this story, which is the geography.
Yeah, it's all over the place, isn't it?
Yeah, and maybe I don't want to sound whatever, but perhaps that isn't a bit of an American thing, because we have that from Lovecraft at the time as well, especially with Rats in the Walls.
Yeah.
The geography and the place names don't quite fit, but, we're pre-Google and all the rest of it, so...
It confused me reading it, because he was talking about the fens.
Yeah.
And say fens in the west and things like that. I was just like, but from the rest of the geography, he's saying that there's fens in Cheshire. Yeah. There's the Peak District.
Well, this is it, because he talks about the Tower of Trajan is on the Welsh border, which is, I don't think the Romans pushed into Wales particularly far. The same as with Scotland, right? They got to the sort of edge of it.
And sort of went, I tell you what.
Yeah, these are a bit,
These guys are a bit mental. Let's not.
Yeah, but in that whole area, as far as I know, there might be marshes or something, but there's certainly no fens. But if he'd have gone the other way from York, if you come down into Lincolnshire, Cambridgeshire, into the Wash,
that is the fens.
All the fens, or even down to Fen Stanton, you see, if this had been set in Fen Stanton.
Yeah.
It makes sense. But then the other issue I have with that is these things dwell in tunnels that kind of riddle the country or certain parts of the country.
Yeah,
a bit difficult in the fens because it's a bit wet.
Yes, it's all underwater. Yeah, well, that was the other thing, because obviously Machen, it's all in it's in the Brecons and everything. It's in mountains and hills.
Is that why he was going for that? Do you think then? Is that why he said the West?
I imagine so. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Because that's because all of Machen stuff is set in Wales, and it's all in the Brecon Beacons and all that kind of business.
Oh, that explains it. That explains it.
That'll be why.
Yeah, so I'm fine with that, as long as he didn't say fens, really, and emphasise the fen bit so much.
Yeah.
Because the fens is a great landscape.
I mean,
I lived there for a while, and obviously in the 19th century it was all reclaimed, but there's still little bits of it.
But didn't he mention hills at one point? So like the fens were as flat as a billiard table.
Well, I suppose if you come across a bit, I mean, I live on the sort of Beds-Cames border now, so it does get a bit more hilly as you come across.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of not really... and it sort of journeys from York to the Welsh borders within an instant, pretty much, isn't it? I mean, what would that take on horseback? It's got to take days at least.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, to get from... Because especially as he'd have to cross the Pennines.
Yeah.
Go along the Peak District, and then you're right, where he's on about, it would be basically the Welsh border in Cheshire.
Right.
So it would be like, sort of Wrexham, Chester, that kind of area, which, it's all hills and it's the Cheshire Plains, isn't it?
Yeah. So that is my only issue, and that explains though why he's done that. If he's looking at the Machen thing.
Oh yeah, that'll be it.
And I think it's just a case of the fens. If you want spooky, it's got to be fens or moors, isn't it? Really.
Oh, aye.
So the other sort of setting I could see for this would be somewhere like Dartmoor, which of course is riddled with caves underneath and everything else.
Yeah.
And you can imagine a subterranean race in there very easily.
Yeah. And well, that's what I do in Bodmin, isn't it? Bodmin Moor. Yeah.
Yes. And my last ghoul story was in that area. It's just made for that kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, like the West Country, because I mean, you just go a bit further up and you're into Machen country from where I set mine. It's one of the reasons I did it there, because it was kind of like, oh, right, okay, well, it's kind of, just below.
And I suppose the other area would be the Yorkshire moors for that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Does this area correspond with Ramsay Campbell's Severn Valley?
Yeah, with the Severn Valley thing, I guess it would. I guess it'd be sort of around Goatswood kind of area.
That's an interesting tie-in as well. I don't know if that would have been a deliberate thing on Campbell's part or not. Perhaps if we can get him on the show at some time, we'll ask him that.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, so before he leaves on this mission, he's gonna see to Valerius, first of all, who's in his little cell. And, he just basically... goes up to the window, calls him over, and
Have that,
stabs him.
you know.
Cuts his throat, basically.
That's what I couldn't help thinking earlier when he was on the cross and he leaned in and he spat in the guy's face. I was thinking, you know, if that had been a Scot, crafty headbutt in, wouldn't it?
Maybe a knee butt.
yeah.
And having done that, he can leave York. And I like this last little detail before he leaves civilization. On the way out, he comes to the small gate in the western wall where the sleepy sort of guard lifts his spear and balls for Bran to halt and give account on himself. And Bran rides up close to him and shows him got his sword in one hand and some gold coins in the other. It's like giving the guy a choice.
Nice, yeah, I love that.
Nice little unspoken thing there, and of course the guy goes for the gold.
I love that earlier when he's talking to his mate, Grom, is it, or whatever it is, about him joining the armies up at the wall, sort of thing. And he says, yeah, and he gets in the way, here's my diplomatic credentials, but take the gold key. You know, it's a bag of coins, you know.
Yeah.
When diplomacy fails, the gold key will open any door. I love
the
that.
Gold key.
Great.
It's nice, isn't it? And that speaks to this idea of civilization again, because to people like Bran, gold, it's just
meaningless,
metal,
isn't it?
It really? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's off into the wilds, the barren wastes, off towards the wild mountains of Wales, and he wandered through the fens seeking a door. And he asks around a bit, and they hear the locals even down there have heard of the tale of war in the north, the skirl of war pipes along the winding walls, of gathering fires in the heather. The eagles of the legions were moving northward, and the ancient road resounded to the measured tramp of iron-clad feet. Again, it's all just so vivid, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this search eventually leads him to the moors, where he strides manfully across the moors, a stark figure blackly etched against the dim crimson fire of the sunset. And he finds a drab hut of wattle and mud. And this is where we encounter Atla, the witch woman of the fens.
Yeah. You get this lovely Machen-esque line there as well. He felt the incredible antiquity of the slumbering land. That's a very Machen-esque line, because it's all about the sleeping land, the things underneath that are going to wake up and would snatch you out of your bed. You know.
And this is where we get our second Mythos reference, right?
Indeed.
Enter, master, if you do not fear to share the roof of the witch woman of Dagon Moor.
Love it. Yeah, it's like long-time listeners will know that we have a segment about Dagon's sack. We have another part of Dagon's anatomy later on.
Yes, we do. In fact, at one point in my notes, I've written Dagon, 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 because like everything, it's just like Dagon's tree, Dagon's bend, Dagon's hill, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of Dagon in the fens, which, to me, that ties in nicely with the East Coast Deep One thing and the whole Dulwich thing. But,
Oh, yeah.
So I like this little bit as well, because this is such a trope now in films. What do you seek in the fens, my lord? And she's sort of doing some cooking or mucking around with some jars and jugs. And he says, I seek a door. I have a song to sing to the worms of the earth. And she drops the jar to shatter on the floor. That's such a nice moment as well.
I thought it was a lovely scene. Again, very visual. Yeah.
And she plays ignorant, right? She's, I don't know what you're talking about, but, well, he returned. My race is very old. They reigned in Britain before the nations of the Celts and the Hellenes were born out of the womb of peoples. But my people were not first in Britain. By the mottles on your skin, by the slanting of your eyes, by the taint in your veins, I speak with full knowledge and meaning. So he knows.
There you go.
Yeah, she's got a blood connection with the...
Well, this is the Machen thing, because that's how they're described.
Yeah.
With the upturned eyes and their mottled skin and the almost sibilant way of talking. It's like the serpent men kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, let's do this here then. We can speculate on who these people are exactly, because we get a lot of serpentine language around them, serpentine descriptions. We never really see them, do we? We just get the gleam of eyes, and which adds to the horror of it, right? The don't show kind of thing.
Yeah, well, people do say that one of the big influences on this story is the novel of the Black Seal, and that is the little people, or the small people who live in the Welsh Hills, who are described exactly as she is described. So that's how I see them in my head. It's the same. It's the same race. It's
So it's like the serpentine race.
Yeah, it's Machen's little people who were the serpent, a serpentine race that was driven off by ape descendants, sort of thing.
So do you think there's a link between this and obviously in the Cole stories we have the actual serpent people?
Yes.
The ones who can change form. When you say, was it Karlama, Karlajarama or something, you say the expression and they have to change back. Do you think this is a...
I think so, because I also see a link between the serpent men that are mentioned in Lovecraft and all that, because that all comes from Machen the same. So it's all, I guess it's all comes from the same wellspring. But but again, like the mythos itself, is got their own take on it, which what makes it interesting.
Yeah.
But it isn't codified is what makes it interesting.
And of course, to some extent, as we've spoken out before on the show, when we get into conspiracy theories, Howard's serpent men, to a large extent, seem to have been the foundation for all the sort of lizard people conspiracies.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice that something that was written as fiction in a kind of factual way, if I can put it like that, then ends up becoming a sort of fact.
In fact, that's a complete fiction.
Yeah, it's almost like there'll be a conspiracy about elves or hobbits or something, isn't it? It's along those lines.
Yeah. Well, give it time, mate. Give it time.
I'd rather have hobbits in charge. At least the food would be good.
Yeah, exactly. They'd have a good sing-song. Good piss up at a sing-song.
And I like this little to and fro. It's almost like a flirty thing they have going on here.
Which is very strange.
Yeah. Man, are you mad? In your madness you come seeking that from which strong men fled screaming in old times. I seek a vengeance. And she shook her head. You have listened to a bird singing. You have dreamed empty dreams. And he responds, I have heard a viper hiss, and I do not dream. So it's like she's testing him a little bit to see, do you really want to go through this?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's exactly what she's doing, because there is a point where she just drops it and just goes, right, okay, then.
Yeah. And he offers her gold. He threatens her, first of all, because she goes, well,
he does,
he take me to them, and she refuses, so he gets the dagger out, and she says, do you think my life is so sweet that I would cling to it as a babe to the breast? So he tries gold, and again she laughs. Rusty metal. Like, what is this rusty metal to me? So he says, well, name me a price. The head of an enemy? And I like this, well, who is mine enemy but thee?
I love this.
And then sort of springs at him, and a dagger splinters on the mail beneath his cloak.
Yeah.
It's like she knew he had the mail on, but she's just making a point.
I love that. It's just, I just love the way it's the thee, I think. It reminds me of them tough Yorkshire lasses. She's a bit Nora Batty, this one, isn't she? Who else is my enemy but thee?
But thee. Yeah. And I was thinking of the Wrath and Calm it's from Shakespeare, wasn't it? From hell's heart I stab at thee. So she does have a price, though. I'll leave it to you to describe that.
A little bit of rumpy pumpy with a king.
Yes.
Pretty much.
The kisses of a king.
Well, not just the kisses. She says kisses to start with, but then she elaborates. She wants a night in the bed of a king.
And here was a really spooky thing as well, because she said, basically, you can imagine what her life is like. She's sort of, I suppose, seen as a sort of... I don't like to use the word so much, but like a half-breed, isn't she? She's got the blood of these people in her. Yeah, she's going to be shunned by the locals, right?
Well, she's a pariah, isn't she? That's basically,
She's not known the love of men, the clasp of a strong arm, the sting of human kisses. What have I known but the lone winds of the fens, the dreary fire of cold sunsets, the whispering of the marsh grasses, and then this one, the faces that blink up at me in the waters of the meres. Ooh. That's creepy.
That's a good one, isn't it? Yeah.
That put me in mind of the dead marshes in Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
Faces that never rot. So we can draw a vow over that night, as Howard does, to be fair. We get a kind of ... sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, we get a fade. We get the literary equivalent of a fade to black.
Yeah, or the camera pans to the roaring fire, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Or the sea
coming in. A volcano erupting.
Subtle. So she gives him directions, basically, to go to Dagon's barrow. And there he can find this artifact that the worms of the earth prize, which is the black stone. Of course, that's the title of another Howard story, or another Howard mythos story set in modern times.
Indeed, which is one of my favourites. Yeah,
Hmm.
which is widely regarded as one of the best mythos tales not written by Lovecraft.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the kind of Sothogia element, isn't it, in that one?
It is, yeah.
The Black Stone, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that it's this same kind of artifact again.
Yeah.
And you can sort of speculate the same one, different one, made at the same time, you know.
Mm. Well, you get them sort of obsidian obelisks and things like that cropping up in a lot of mythos literature.
Yeah. So Bran finds this barrow and he works his way in, and he ends up going down these narrow, windy steps deep into the earth. And we get the mention of a foul charnel house scent flowed out of the aperture. So we get a bit of Smithian charnalism in there as well.
Yes.
And this was obviously a tomb at one point because it's a barrow. But beneath the tomb, there is something else. It seems to be like a large stone, a 6-sided stone.
Mm.
And opening this reveals the gaping blackness of a dark well with small worn steps that lead downward and out of sight. And I like the idea for this, that the steps are just a bit too small for human feet. That's kind of one of those nice details that if you're in that situation, you think, well, it's just some steps. And then you think, right, not made by humans.
Again, it's very Machen-esque. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole thing of these doorways that weren't built for people taller than, and all that kind of stuff.
And then we get this marvellous claustrophobic bit, which actually reminded me of the guy who did the Weird Stone of Brimagen. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
Brisingamen.
But yeah. Was it Ghana?
Yeah.
There's this great scene in that where the kids go through these tunnels and these tunnels get narrower and narrower. Very much put me in mind of this.
And it's funny because I grew up down the road from Alderley Edge, and I actually worked at a place there. I used to drink in the club, Brisingamens. So
nice.
In Alderley Edge. Yeah.
Wow. So I've got Fen Stanton and you've got Brisingamens.
I've got Alderley Edge. Yeah.
And it's the same thing. This passageway is already sort of crouching a bit already, even though he's not the tallest of the guys. And it gets smaller and smaller, and he ends up sort of crawling through it on his back, going deeper and deeper.
Yeah, I love this line here. The steps had ceased altogether, and the stone felt slimy to the touch, like a serpent's lair. So there's another nod. But this line made me laugh just because of my own warped sense of humour. What beings, Bran wondered, had slithered up and down this slanting shaft for how many centuries? Matron.
Slithering, slanting shafts, yes.
If this had been Smith, I would have seriously questioned that line.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a phosphorescence he sees ahead, and he pops out in a little space where there's a grim altar built of human skulls. And on the altar lay a sullen night black object, the Black Stone.
Nice.
So he grabs it, and we get the similar claustrophobic climb back up out of the darkness, where he starts, and you do, this is what happens, isn't it, in those situations. It's like the darkness kind of is closing in, and it is imagining the fangs sinking into him as he's going.
Mm.
It's funny how much the absence of light affects the human mind, isn't it?
It's strange, isn't it? It's really odd. It's like when I've been on long walks and things like that, and you walk through forests all day, right? Just me in a forest, and like happy as the world. As soon as it starts getting a bit dark, you start going, hang on a minute, was somebody else there? It's weird the tricks your own mind plays on you. Just it's that primeval thing, isn't it? You need fire and a big stick.
It is, yeah, it is that keep close to the fire idea, I guess.
Yeah.
Isn't it? But he makes it back out, nothing happens, and now we're off to Dagon's Mere. It's a bit like a sort of Dagon funland, isn't it? It's in a Dagon theme park.
I love it.
So he throws the stone in Dagon's Mere. He wants a good hiding place for it, because he figures he drops it in the water and no one's going to know where it is or find it. And he takes a rough note of where he dropped it. So he returns to the witch woman and says, right, I've got the Black Stone. And we get this little thing, like the worms of the earth are onto him already. Because he says about his horse, he heard his horse screaming last night, and something crunched beneath his thundering hooves. And it's like they're onto him already and they're tracking him.
Yeah.
And one obviously popped up in the stable by the horse. And I've heard stealthy sounds in the night and noises beneath my dirt floor, as if worms burrow deep in the earth. And he accuses her of betraying him, but she says, well, no, they just know you've taken their stone.
Yeah.
The further they retreated from the world of men, the greater have grown their powers in other uncanny ways. Some dawn your hut will stand empty, and if men dare investigate, they will find nothing except crumbling bits of earth on the dirt floor. You're just going to disappear into the ground.
I love that line about they've developed their senses in a different way, because it's almost like, when somebody loses their sight, they'll develop a keener sense of hearing. They've cut themselves off from earthly sense, and they've got some other, probably feel a vibration or something.
Yeah, well, if you think how moles operate and everything else.
Yeah,
And even then, if you look at, marine life, like sharks and whales, they're communicating over vast distances. Sight is probably the least of their senses, really.
Well, like those blind cave fish and things like that, bats.
Yeah. So, having got their black stone, their artifact, their prized artifact, now he's in a position to make his bargain.
Yeah.
So, she's going to take him to meet the actual worms of the earth, which are across the moors and into another cave. And again, the cave is just really, it's just like the porch, isn't it? It's just the entranceway.
Yep.
Because we find another well and another set of steps. And she comes with him this time. Atla comes with him. And many caves in these hills, said Atla, her voice sounding small and strangely brittle in the vastness, are but doors to greater caves which lie beneath, even as a man's words and deeds are but small indications of the dark caverns of murky thought lying behind and beneath.
Yes.
I thought that was interesting, but we get that direct connection here between the physical world and the psychological world. And I don't know, you can get into a Freudian analysis or whatever you like. I guess with Lovecraft, it was the sea, wasn't it? That was the unknown depths. Yeah. With Howard, it seems to be the earth.
Yeah, again, like back to the Machen thing, his was all caves. Whereas Hodgson, that was all sea as well.
Yeah.
That was a lot of sea stuff. Like his old Sargasso sea cycle was really, really good. It was all, creatures from the fathomless deep, brilliant.
And this is where we get, a kind of glimpse, our first glimpse of these creatures. And all we can really see is the eyes, just the tiny pinpoints of light and stealthy noises, not like those made by any human foot. And it's like flickering fireflies until they're sort of surrounding him, a solid sea of them fading away into the gloom. And he's trying to get his head around the vastness of this cavern as well, which he can only sort of judge the size of by this huge crowd of creatures that are now around him.
It's a haunting image, isn't it? It's like if you've ever been in a cave and you know that no matter what, you've got a torch and you're in a big cavern and your torchlight doesn't reach past a certain cone of light, and beyond that it's shadow. It's a haunting image to think that all in that shadow is all these hundreds and hundreds of these little creatures who want to rip you to pieces for nicking their rock, Yeah,
because this isn't his imagination.
No,
this is
exactly
real, right? And you get the sense that one full step here and is toast, isn't he?
Yeah.
But Bran being Bran and being a Howardian hero, where others might have fainted, he shows defiance here. He feels the waves of terrible menace emanating from them, but he realises the horror of his position, but he did not fear. His blood raced fiercely, but it was with the hot excitement of the hazard, not the drive of terror. And that, to me, is one of the major differences between Lovecraft and Howard.
Yeah, they're big burly men, aren't they? He did sort of specialise in red-blooded chaps.
Yeah. And there's a sense of them sort of shuffling in a little bit closer, perhaps, or something like that.
Yeah.
And he sets his back to the wall and draws his sword in his right hand and his dirk in his left.
I love that line there, tensed like a wolf at bay, waiting the charge, while at his side the woman cowered, her eyes ablaze. Just a great image. That's your cover image right there, isn't it?
Yeah. It is, isn't it? Absolutely, yeah. And this is the defiance now, right? It's roll on me like a flood if you dare. Before your viper fangs drink my life, I will reap your multitudes like ripened barley. Of your severed heads will I build a tower, and of your mangled corpses will I rear up a wall. Dogs of the dark, vermin of hell, worms of the earth, rush in and try my steel. He's got a good script writer, hasn't he, Bran?
Hasn't he? Does get the blood pumping.
It's always great heroic stuff with Howard, but it's not that heroism like Lord of the Rings, which is sort of come on chaps, let's for Gondor, hurrah, Elendil.
No, it's that's a very British heroism, isn't it? That's like always like Zulu, isn't it? It's, wait till you see the whites of their eyes, lads.
It is, isn't it?
Over the top chaps, 6 of the best, trousers down.
This is more like a sort of snarling defiance, is it? But also in this, there's that grimness is, you're going to kill me because there's hundreds of you, but there's going to be a mound of dead. That's a very heroic, perhaps in the sort of Beowulf sense.
Yeah, well, it's that barbarian sort of, you might get me, but I'll get you first, sort of.
Yeah, totally.
Well, again, it fits with the Pictish thing, doesn't it? It's almost like the Scots, isn't it? Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
Who's going to be that first one? So I get a sense of this, even with the worms of the earth, there's still that, oh, blimey, is a bit.
Yeah.
Brian, do you want to go first?
Let's do some rock, paper, scissors.
Pushing the other one in front.
Yeah, but that's why I bring up the Scots, because when they were fighting the English, that was basically their thing. They would sort of just run at them, even though they were vastly outnumbered. But because the English were kind of like, what the hell's going on here? Scattered chaps,
Yeah,
they break their lines.
It does have an effect. Yeah,
it's that front, isn't it? It's almost like poker face if you think about it.
It's that old thing about it's not the size of the dog in the fight, is it?
Fight in the dog.
Size of the fight in the dog. Yeah.
Speaking of which,
by magic, the dog appears. You see how we organise that, listeners?
So the hounds are Tinderloss after you again. You can get your plaster around again, mate.
It is. It's Well, it's your back wall they're coming through.
God,
so But this hesitation on their part, this is where he now gets the chance to make the deal, and it's a simple deal. You bring me Titus Sulla, and I'll return the Black Stone to you.
Pretty much it. It's simple. But
that's pretty much it.
I love this line here from Atla. They fear you, O king, by the black secrets of Verlay. Who are you that hell itself quails before you? Not your steel, but the stark ferocity of your soul.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Again, another very Howardian thing, the primordial soul. There's this sense of, what was it said before, is not tall in stature, but is tall in presence. And I thought this was interesting as well, because part of the deal is that they shouldn't molest or harm Atla as well, because of the aid that she's given him. So, he has some consideration for her.
Yeah.
And I like this when he makes his demand. His voice hummed like the purr of a hunting tiger. So he's really keeping up this pressure on him, and he's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they should deliver into my hands Titus Sulla, now commanding the Tower of Trajan.
And here we go. And here's where we get my favourite of Dagon land, my favourite area. They understand, said Atla. Bring the Black Stone to Dagon's ring tomorrow night when the earth is veiled. So we have Dagon's sack. Howard has Dagon's ring. Yeah.
There you go. It's complete. We've got the full set. All we need is Dagon's helmet.
Yeah. Well, didn't Brian Lumley do Dagon's bell?
Oh dear! Like I say, we said in Strange Shadows recently, Smith takes us to the stars. Mendes and Poyton will drag you into the gutter.
yeah, exactly.
We like to think of it as a gift.
Yeah, definitely.
Talent.
See a tone, have to lower it.
Yes, absolutely. And we get this nice thing here because deal done. Yeah, bring the Black Stone to Dagon's ring. Lay the stone on the altar. They'll bring Sulla to you. So that's it. He's climbing up the stairs with Atla close behind him. And I like the way at the top of the stairs he pauses and turns and looks down again. And there's this glittering ocean of yellow eyes upturned. But the owners of those eyes kept carefully beyond the dim circle of torchlight, and of their bodies he could see nothing. So it's still that. We still don't know what these things look like. But there's this hissing speech going on. You can imagine they're all whispering amongst themselves now.
Yeah.
And also then this other nice little touch, because although Atla has helped him so far, she's not an ally, right?
No.
And they come up into the out of the sort of tunnel and back up to the cave, and she's going to extinguish the torch, but the king stays her. Keep it until we're out of the cave, he grunted. We might tread on an adder in the dark, which she laughs at, you know. So then we come into the end of the story. It's back to Dagon's mere, and he dives in, and it takes him a few goes to find the stone, right? Which is reasonable.
Yeah.
And as he's coming out, he gets this sense of something else in the water with him. And we just get this little hint here of legends of it's a Loch Ness monster type thing, isn't it? There's something that lives in Dagon's mere. We don't see it. He more senses its presence, and there's the ripples on the water and everything as he comes up. And again, it's another throwback to that Machen idea of the ancient landscape.
Yeah.
The time-worn myths of the ancient land were taking form and coming to life before his eyes. So he's got his black stone, and he's going to head to Dagon's ring. And to do that, he sort of goes past the Tower of Trajan. So, but as he's riding up to the tower, he can't see it.
Yep. I love this bit.
So you think, well, he should investigate this. And he finds that the impregnable Tower of Trajan was no more. It's just basically a pile of ruins with a little bit of the tower leaning drunkenly off to one side, as if its foundations have been cut half away, which of course they have.
I can't help wondering, just like my brain just sort of went, is that what happened to the Leaning Tower of Pisa?
Oh, that's a good one.
There you go. There's another idea.
So there is just one survivor, or there's a guy who's lying in all the rubble, all busted up, and he's obviously dying.
Yeah.
But he can tell Bran something about what happened, and basically he says the walls fell. They crashed down like the skies falling on the day of doom. Ah, Jove, the skies rained shards of granite and hailstones of marble. And your natural assumption is... I think this is a little bit strange from Bran, really. He says, oh, I haven't felt an earthquake.
Yeah.
He knows what's happening, surely, but I guess it's to set up the tension, you know. And we get this thing about the scratching sounds below the earth, like rats burrowing or worms hollowing out the earth, and then the tower collapses, and Sulla has disappeared. That was quite nice because they hear his shrieks from his chamber, and when they rush in, they can still hear him screaming.
Yeah, the screams seem to recede into the bowels of the earth. Lovely.
And he's disappeared down this big black hole in the floor.
It's like reading this, I can't, like, because of how visual Howard's writing is, I'd love to see a film adaptation of this, because I think they could do it like that scene. That'd be brilliant. Your guards rushing in, swords drawn, and just this.
And that's why that graphic adaptation was so good, because it captured the whole thing, and the art was great.
I have to try and track down that. I'd like to see that.
But yeah, you can really see it as a film as well. And this is where I think Howard would work. I mean, you know, people talk about the Conan series. Rather than a movie, do the stories. You can link them together with little, you know, little short things. They're quite easily linked together.
Oh yeah, it was like they do with the Sharp novels.
Yeah.
I mean, how they linked them. It was basically a bit of dialogue at the beginning, or something about, last week we kicked their asses at blah blah blah. You know.
And I suspect they'll do the same with Reacher and whatever, because you know he's going from place to place. There's nothing that connects these adventures particularly, but you know,
no,
it doesn't need that huge.
I don't think it really needs it, as long as your characters are established and you put like a date at the bottom of the screen at the beginning of the episode. I don't think it really matters, you know.
So we end up at Dagon's ring, and Atla's there, and he puts the stone on the altar, and the worms show up as promised, and all you can see of them is the billowing masses of shadow which heaved and writhed and squirmed with almost fluid consistency.
Nice.
Let them make good their bargain, he exclaimed angrily. Then see, O king, cried Atla in a voice of piercing mockery. And there's this sort of stir, I like this, a seething in the writhing shadows. And from the darkness crept like a four-legged animal, a human shape that fell down and grovelled at Bran's feet, and writhed and mowed, and lifting a death's head, howled like a dying dog.
Oh, he does such a turn of phrase for the grim, doesn't he?
It is. It's yeah. And this is Sulla, who I think Atla describes it as well. They dragged him through the earth, and he saw things that even you didn't see, and he's totally failed his sand roll.
Yes, yeah, completely failed his sand roll.
Complete big time, and he's howling, he's glassy eyed, he's frothing at the mouth.
Yeah. So it's kind of bittersweet for Bran because he's done all this, but he doesn't get the justice he really wants because this guy's broken, and he ends up giving him the death in mercy.
Well, this is it, and I thought to give this stroke in vengeance, he said somberly, I give it in mercy, Vale Caesar.
Yeah.
So he chops his head off, basically, and Atla laughs. This is the monkey's paw kind of moment, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You got your wish, but and Atla says, well, they didn't harm him.
Yeah.
You said not to harm him, they didn't. They just dragged him through the deepest pits of hell.
Yeah. They harmed him not. It was what he saw and came to know that broke his brain. Nice and to the point, that.
And then that hearkening back to the Machanesque.
Yeah.
Well for the Romans that they know not the secrets of this accursed land, with its monster-haunted meres, its foul-witch women, and its lost caverns and subterranean realms where spawn in the darkness shapes of hell.
Yeah.
But again, see, I think with a Tolkien, maybe being a little unfair to Tolkien here, but certainly in that line of fantasy, heroes good, monsters bad. You know, it's very clear.
Oh yeah, there's definite shades of grey in this, whereas it is black and white in a lot of epic fantasy, I find.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why one of the reasons I'm not as big a fan of it, because I don't like stereotypical heroes.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the big, the heroic chap who sweeps in to save the day.
Yeah.
Get the girl and kill the baddies and save the planet thing. That just bores the arse off me. I like my anti-heroes.
Nearly always the prince in it or something, or the lost king is
it's like the Disney hero.
Yeah.
It's the dashing prince on the on the stallion with this big sword. Hello. I'd rather have the scrappy Bran McMahon who wants a good punch up with the Romans.
He has his own, and this is the same thing with the Conan character. Well, yeah, the barbarian, the savage, and everything else, but they have their own code of honor.
Exactly, there is a moral code there.
Yeah.
But that's why they work because they're flawed. But but that's real to me because there's no such thing as a truly heroic person. Everybody has a flaw. Everybody has a weakness or a character trait that's a bit annoying or whatever. It's just life, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where Atla makes this point. Well, you say these things, monster-haunted spawn of hell and everything else, but are they more foul than a mortal who seeks their aid? And he knows that she's right, and give them back their black stone. And he finally kind of loses his temper. This is where he loses it right at the end.
Yeah.
I guess because of this, not only is he been robbed of his vengeance, but also now he knows he's tainted. He's had this association with these things.
Yes. Yeah.
He's never going to recover that,
Well, you have that lovely line from Atla, don't you? Just a little bit further on about, they know you now. They know you.
Yes. Yeah. It's like being in with the mob, isn't it, or something?
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Someone's done you a favour, then in 3 years' time, suddenly you can get a knock on the door. And, yeah. So he throws the stone at them so hard you hear the snapping of bones. And we get, for one moment, we get that little fleeting glimpse of them. There's maybe the moon comes out, and as they, again, that sense of almost surging towards him, perhaps, or something. And this is the only description we get. A brief impression of a broad, strangely flattened head, pendulous writhing lips that bared curved, pointed fangs, and a hideously misshapen dwarfish body that seemed mottled, all set off by those unwinking reptilian eyes.
Which is almost word for word how Machen describes his little people.
Right. Worms of the earth, back into your holes and burrows. Ye foul the air and leave on the clean earth the slime of the serpents ye have become. Gonar was right. There are shapes too foul to use even against Rome. And Atla's laughing all the time because, she knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, king of Pictland, king of fools.
That's nice. And
Yeah.
then I like this offer as well. Do you blench at so small a thing? Stay and let me show you the real fruits of the pits.
Yeah.
No thanks, got to go.
Yeah.
Got left the oven on, got things to do.
Great.
And yeah, that idea of you are stained with the taint, you have called them forth and they will remember and they will come to you again.
Yeah.
And he does belt her in the mouth there, which is a little bit, okay, all right.
Yeah. It was kind of like a bit unnecessary, really. Shut up.
And then it ends with him leaping into the saddle, and basically he wants to just get up north and get involved in a fight. And
yeah, I love that.
Big battle, a clean fight, and just
clean slaughter.
Yeah, it's almost like mindless, or the red maelstrom of battle. So he can sort of put all this stuff out of his mind,
cleanse himself with a gun on his scrap.
But this is nice. He rode through the night like a hunted ghost. That's a nice thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because now he's always going to be looking over his shoulder.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's the thing. It's like every time he hears a scrabbling in the dirt, it's not just going to be a weasel or something. It's like, shit, they're after me.
Yep, so he rode through the night like a hunted ghost until the hellish laughter of the howling werewoman died out in the darkness behind him. So there we go. He got his revenge, but he didn't get his revenge.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he's forever marked himself.
Yeah, that's it. I think the analogy you just made about like the mob is kind of quite a fitting, really. It's very much like that, isn't it? It's like once they know you, you're always on their radar, sort of thing. Yeah.
So let's finish by talking a little bit about the Picts, because obviously there's the historic Picts and there's Howard's Picts.
Yes.
Picts. And the two don't always kind of match up. So the historic Picts were sort of seen as a lost people, if we look from Victorian times onwards, where I was saying to Lara the other day, most of our history of our generation from school is really Victorian, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Vikings with helmets, pirates with skull and crossbones and all this stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's all Victorian. And half of it you find out.
Twaddle, yeah. Yeah. I was thinking something similar the other day, Well, it was when I was doing research on Vikings for something. I was like the same thing. Just like, yeah. Well, when I was at school, it was all horny helmets
and berserkers and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So the Picts, certainly in Howard's time, were thought of as a one particular body of people. But now the thinking is that they were actually a much more culturally diverse group.
Yeah. And
the term Picts actually really comes about in the 3rd century from the Romans. To describe the northern tribes they sort of lived north of the sort of line. If you go Glasgow, Edinburgh, they were from there upwards, which I guess is a little way north of Hadrian's Wall.
Quite a bit,
probably about a good 50 plus miles. I would have thought at least.
Oh yeah, it's quite a trek.
Because the wall is further south than people think, isn't it?
It is.
It's like Hexham, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
And the word Pict means painted, which refers either to the woad or tattoos. There was also a Gallic people called the Pictones, which I thought, there's our band name.
Band, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, all the way from
Bonnie, Scotland.
The Pictones. I bet there's a group called that. The old Irish name was, I'm going to murder pronunciations here, so I apologise in advance, Cruithne. And from the old Welsh, we get Prydnin, or Prydmark. The word Prydmark means to draw. So again, it's this idea of tattoos or...
Yeah, so painted men, yeah.
Yeah. Now, that word led us to Pretani, who are sort of Celtic tattooed folk, which led to Britannica. Can you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
At some point, I think the Romans changed the P to a B, and we end up with Britannia and Britain. So the roots of Britain are in the Picts, which is an interesting thing. And I guess, the Britons use woad as well, right?
Yeah.
where I used to live out in the Fens, which of course was around sort of Boudica territory.
Oh yeah.
Where there was actually a place down the road called Powder Blue Farm.
Yes.
Where they used to apparently was a road place at one time.
Yeah.
And, as they say, all roads lead to Rome.
Oh dear. I've got to just briefly on the Picts. I think whenever I hear the word Pict, I think of Pink Floyd. It's one of those weird things.
Oh yeah, of course, the track, isn't it?
Yeah. Several species of small furry animal gathered together in a cave, grooving with a Pict.
Yes, was that Amagama?
Amagama, yeah.
It was, wasn't it? So that's the historic Picts in a nutshell. Of course, there's a lot more involved than that. Now, with Howard, we get the Picts are a race he returned to again and again. They're like a thread throughout his whole stories. And he actually says himself the Picts were the race that he most identified with. And he came up with little verses like, "How can I wear the harness of toil and sweat at the daily round, while in my soul forever the drums of Pictdom sound?" So he talks about, in his own work, the origin is this pre-Celtic tribe. I read of them first in Scottish histories, merely bear mentionings usually in disapproval. I was an enthusiast of Scottish history, such as I could obtain, feeling a kinship with the kilted clansman because of the Scottish strain in my own blood. In the brief and condensed histories I read, the Picts were given only bare mention, as when they clashed with and were defeated by the Scotch. The fullest description of this race I read at the time was a brief remark by an English historian that the Picts were brutish savages living in mud huts. So this is that very typical thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the Romans did it, right? The term of the word of barbarians, right? From the Greek is...
Yeah, it's the other. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the colonialism again.
It's pith helmets and tweed all over again, isn't it?
Then when I was about 12, I spent a short time in New Orleans and found in a Canal Street library a book detailing the pageant of British history from prehistoric times up to the Norman Conquest. This is where I first learned of the small dark people which first settled Britain, and they were referred to as Picts. So this is kind of what he picked up on, was this aspect of the Picts. I felt a strong sympathy for this people, and then and there adopted them as a medium of connection with ancient times. I made them a strong warlike race of barbarians, gave them an honourable history of the past, and created for them a great king, one Bran Mac Morn. The name Bran Mac Morn he actually got from another favourite historical character, Gul Brennus, who sacked Rome, and he said the Mac Morn comes from the famous Irish hero Gul Mac Morn. I changed the spelling of the Mac to give it a non-Gaelic appearance, since the Gaelic alphabet contains no K. So while Bran Mac Morn is Gaelic for the raven son of Morn, Bran Mac Morn has no Gaelic significance, but has a meaning of its own. So he uses these all the way from his Cull stories, pre-Cataclysm, with Cull, of course, his sidekick is Brawl the Spear Slayer, who's the Picts, as opposed to Dr. Steve Brawl, who is something else entirely. And then we get them in the Hyborian age, where they're mortal enemies of the Sumerians. The Hyborian Picts come across more as sort of Native Americans, really.
Yes. Yeah.
They have that sort of frontier feel to them.
Yes.
And then we come through into Bran Mac Morn, but then even in modern stories like Children of the Night, Picts are still referenced as this even more devolved race. By that time they've devolved, because according to Howard, the Picts were displaced by the invading Celts and were driven up into Scotland, where they intermingled with the locals and kind of devolved and degenerated, which again is a common theme in Lovecraft and Howard, and that devolution.
Yes.
They were known for burning enemy prisoners alive.
Yes.
And apparently some were werewolves as well.
Fair enough. Well, you got to do something to keep yourself occupied on a Saturday evening, don't you?
Yeah.
Set someone on fire and bark at the moon. That's Ozzy Osbourne, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. We get an Aussie reference in as well. Yeah, we're not having many goth references in this.
No,
time, but,
no.
We'll get Aussie in there.
Well, I nearly said earlier about the Romans, if you're so goth, where were you when we sacked Rome? So,
nice.
that was a T-shirt. I saw somebody wearing a Whitby Goth weekend one year. It was just like, nice,
brilliant,
nice.
Brilliant. This isn't the last we see of Bran. he is referenced a couple of times, as we mentioned before, and with Lovecraft as well. This is the last actual Bran story, and funnily enough, it's the only one that's written through Pictish eyes. In all the other stories, the main character is not a Pict, but there's an interaction with Bran. And there is one other story. Bran is rumoured to have been killed in battle, but in the story, the Dark Man, he reappears as the Dark Man of the title, which is an idol. Because by that time, I think it's 200 or 300 years after this, maybe even a little bit after, actually. The Picts revere him as a god, and that story centres around the Dark Man idol, which is Bran McMorn.
Yeah.
And they're later described as the last remnants of the Pictish Empire faded like snow on the mountainside, and that was up in the region of Galloway, so they gradually died out, which I suppose the worms of the earth did as well. It seems they're all doomed to suffer the same fate, these races. Howard was very strong on his racist. I guess we can call it racist in a sense, in that he categorised very much by race and drew in quite broad strokes.
Yeah.
But in another example, we have here a dark-skinned character who he feels a lot of empathy and sympathy for.
Yeah.
So it's not just as simple as saying that race is good, that race is bad. It's more nuanced than Lovecraft, certainly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mind you, the KKK were more nuanced than Lovecraft.
Yeah, well, yes.
So let us know what you think, listeners. Any thoughts you've got on Worms of the Earth? We've covered a lot of history today, and anything you want to pick us up on and correct us is fine, because, you know.
Yeah, pronunciations, go for it. Yeah.
Or if you have anything to add, by all means. I still feel we could delve further in this, particularly with the Picts. I mean, perhaps we're bound to return to Howard at some point in the future anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yes, well, I definitely want to do the Black Stone at some point. Like I say, it's one of my favourites. So, you know.
And I think it is, like you say, you can pick out these threads. Did you see what I did there? That run through. They're like sort of seams, aren't they, through Howard stories, but then you can layer Lovecraft onto that or next to that, and Smith and Cutler and everyone, and they run through the whole lot. It's quite interesting how that
it is
developed. Yeah. I can't think of any parallel, really, in any other type of fiction.
No, because you often find that a lot of times that the original creators are quite precious about things, whereas Lovecraft very much wasn't, and all of his mates very much weren't. They all kind of like, yeah, go for it. And it was all in jokes, and that's how it started, really. It was all in jokes, wasn't it? It was them.
Yeah. Well, it's that fun again, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
So, yes, but do let us know what you think, listener. Always interested to hear your views.
Indeed.
Yep, you can post up on our Facebook page. You can leave comments on our various outlets at YouTube, Patreon, and so on. And, of course, we don't have time today. We've actually not been able to fit it in the shop, have we?
No, it's so bulbous. I'm going to have to, we're going to have to empty it somehow.
So Dagon Sack is going to have to wait until next time, but do send your queries in to dagonsack@outlook.com. Dagon does read every letter we get, I can promise you that.
Yeah. Don't send them to Dagon's ring by accident.
Yeah, we won't be going there.
No, I'm not going in there.
Speaking of Patreon, while you're on our Patreon page, please do look at the subscription options. Remember, not only do you get bonus content to the Innsmouth Book Club, you also get bonus content to Strange Shadows, our Clark Ashton Smith podcast, and you also get a monthly copy of Innsmouth Gold and various other bits and pieces. And we've got some readings coming up, haven't we, Tim, I think?
Indeed, yeah. I've done a reading of Ambrose Bierce's Some Haunted Houses, which is a 7-story short anthology. They're all very short stories. It's about just over an hour in length, but yeah. So going to get that up at some point, probably around Halloween, I reckon.
Yes. And speaking of Halloween, we've also got a live Halloween chat planned as well.
Nice.
We've got some guests coming in from various parts of the world. So we're going to organise that, and of course we'll let you know all the details of that. Don't know if that's going to be on Zoom or YouTube or how we're going to do that quite yet. We have to clear it with the Esoteric Order of Dagon first, of course, because we're using their back room again. So.
Oh yeah, do use their function room. Yeah. We're not having pilchard vol-au-vents again, though.
All right, well, that sounds like the bus pulling up outside, so time for us to depart.
Yeah. Come on, gather round, get ready. You don't want to be here after nightfall.
And as we always say in Innsmouth around Halloween, just on the way out to the bus, if you do see a local with a good mask or costume on, please don't go up and compliment them, because it's probably not a mask or a costume.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, we've got Russell Smeaton coming in next time. Author and artist Russell Smeaton. He was one of the first guests at the Gilman House, so we're looking forward to catching up with Russell and finding out what he's up to. Hope you can join us for that. And just one last thing before we leave. The music you've heard in this episode is from my album Samaria, which is a collection of soundscapes and poetry readings, all based on the work of Robert E. Howard. So if you follow the link in the show notes, you can get a CD or a download copy of that. Okay, that's it. Thanks again for joining us, folks. We'll see you next time. With that, it's goodbye from me, Rob Huyton.
And goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.